To One More Dig Metal Detecting Stories. I'm Dave Spanenberg. Welcome to the podcast, everyone. Just a reminder that this podcast will be uploaded as a video to YouTube. Obviously, a video to YouTube. Um, I also downloaded a little short video um, today on Monday, so you won't hear that until Tuesday, but downloaded a video with a couple digs and some info on the area that I'm detecting, and um, just a little midwinter fun hanging out in the woods. Um, this episode is going to be interesting. I have some educational information that I'm going to share a little later on, comparing the definition of relic versus artifact and which is which, and what falls into which category, and what types of things could be considered both, have some sort of a crossover, um, which is exciting. I don't want to say it's confusing, but it's very subjective, I think. And I don't know as you can, be wrong generally in using one over the other. I think everyone pretty much knows what you mean, whether you say relic or artifact, except maybe historians and archaeologists might disagree with you. But yeah, I'll talk about that for a minute. Like I said, I did go out once. Well, I might not have said that yet, but I did get out once in the last 2 weeks. It was maybe twice, but one of them was yesterday, and I recorded a couple digs, and I've already downloaded or uploaded the video to YouTube. Couple digs, an explanation, some history on one of the items that I found. That was fun. Spent the afternoon yesterday out in the woods. It was like almost 40 degrees here, and I could dig pretty much anywhere. I actually was able to dig out in a field too, on the periphery, not in the middle of the field, but on the periphery. And it just happened that the snow was melted around the edges. I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but yeah. But the woods were easy digging. Um, it's amazing how many layers of leaves you have to go down through to get to soil. It basically you find something that's 4 inches in the soil, it's like 10 inches deep, with the leaves. Although 6 inches of leaves, detector goes through really pretty easily. So yeah, so little outing, fun. It was sunny, um, out in one of my permissions that's not too far away. So it's funny to be out there. Actually, I hunt the woods there occasionally during summer or whatever, and you can't see, and you have no. I mean, you know where you are because I've been there, but it's almost like if you put someone out there that didn't know, it would be like, oh my gosh, I'm out in the middle of nowhere. And then with the leaves down, and then the added visibility that the white of the snow adds. I was only, I don't know. I thought I'm in the deep in the woodlot, and I was only probably, I don't know, 75 yards away from the field. It was a pretty day. Um, I'll do that some more. It's I don't know. It's probably 30 here today. I haven't looked at the forecast, so I don't know what's coming up. I am going to South Carolina next week for 5 days, um, and I'll be metal detecting every day. So I'll keep you updated. I thought this podcast was going to be regularly scheduled to happen when I was down there. It didn't work out that way, but I'll probably do one sometime in the middle, when I'm down there, just like I said, I want to talk about the triple score a little bit. I'm going to bring the mana core as well, um, just to update on finds and um, you know how things are going with testing out the machine and that type of thing. So, and it'll be fun. It's not um, super warm down there. I mean, it'll be in the 60s the first day, and then the 50s the rest of the time. But it obviously way warmer than New Hampshire. So, let me look at my notes. Sorry, I have to look down, and this is a podcast first, remember, and that's how I. That's kind of how I do things. I'll get used to um, not having to do that. I don't know how. I'd like to hear from other YouTubers how they look at their notes, but never seem to look away from the screen. If you have some sort of screen behind your camera that you can see, or something else, or if you just commit it all completely to memory, which would be pretty impressive. I have a problem with tangents, so I occasionally have to look at notes to make sure that I didn't miss what I intended to be talking about. But either way, so let's get into. Oh, I am going to explain what I found yesterday. Actually, I did post a video on it, but I found this really cool thing. I found a mason jar lid, and I found it in an area where I had found a forged iron hinge with rose head nails, and that's 1700 stuff, and there must have been some sort of building where I was. Um, I don't know, a little shed or a well building, or there's no evidence of there ever being any sort of a dwelling in this area. And I've looked back on maps, even a hand drawn map back to the early 1700s, and there's nothing there. So I'm not sure, but it was some sort of a structure. And so 2 years ago, I found a V nickel, and you know the the time range of a V nickel, I don't 1880 to 1915 ish, somewhere in there. And so this mason jar lid was well. Let me move back. Mason jars were invented in with the lids were invented in 1858 by a person whose last name was Mason, and um, the jars themselves are basically what we use today. I mean, they really haven't changed much, nor have the lids. The particular lid that I found would be 1890 to about 1915, and it's made out of zinc. And I'll show it in the video that I showed it in the video that I've posted earlier today, and also a photo. But it's pretty cool. I mean, that along with the V nickel makes me think, and the hinge, the hinge, let's say 1790, 17, I'm not sure, but it's old. And then V nickel and mason jar lid, 1890. So something was going on in there. I mean, it was probably most likely a field at one point. Um, More than likely, obviously. There's a little pond area back in there. Um, but yeah, so it was likely a field. But I mean, the nickel and the mason jar um, lid, they were doing something back there in the late 1800s. And, who knows? Maybe they were picnicking. I did make sure I pulled that lid out, and the first thing I did was move my gear out of the way and go back over it, because we all know that folks um, would hide their coins in jars and bury them to keep them safe before banks, and many folks didn't trust banks. So Yeah, I was hoping I was going to find some sort of massive silver coin spill from um, 1890, but that was not the case. But I still found the lid, which was pretty cool, and a couple of bullets. And yeah, that's basically it. I only made like 4 or 5 digs. I wasn't out there all afternoon, a couple hours. Um, but the finds were far and few between. A bottle cap I found too, which those things are a menace. But yeah, so I'm going to get into the main event here for the. This would be season 5, episode 11, and I'm going to call it Relics versus Artifacts. And I'm going to have to look at notes here for all of you watching me. And I look down. I just want you to know in advance, until I figure out how to look at notes when I'm doing while I'm recording videos. I'm gonna have to do this a little bit. But so let's jump right in. I use the internet and an AI to accumulate this information. So there's a lot of you out there who are historians and archaeologists and anthropologists, and you may disagree with all of this. Um, it's something that, with all the research I've done, um, most of it's corroborated across different types of research. So I would love it if there's anything that I get wrong, if there's anything that could be added. It would be awesome to just please put it in the comments, because I'm not an authority on this stuff. Um, I never even, you know, I thought they were just words that were used interchangeably. And um, yeah, so let's uh, let's start off here. I'm gonna read something first, and then go through a couple scenarios. So the definition of a relic is a metal object preserved mainly for its symbolic or commemorative value, often tied to a specific person or moment. So a relic is something that's more, let's say you find a flat button out in a field. That would not be specifically tied to an event or a person per se. Um, but if the button was a George Washington button, that would be a relic. So it's tied to a specific important event and individual in this case. Um, so the definition would say that a George Washington inaugural button is a relic. Um, and conversely, it would say that a flat button lost out in the middle of a field would be an artifact. Um, a couple more examples of relics: a badge or insignia worn by a Revolutionary War officer. Well, I think we have a theme here that if you can tie it to an event or a person that's significant, symbolic, like the Civil War, a lot of the items found related to the Civil War will be relics and not considered artifacts. Um, it even comes down to non-metal items, like if you're on a metal detecting or whatever on a battlefield, um, well, anything you find is going to be a relic because it's tied to that event, down to the clothing of a soldier, or even remains sometimes folks find on battlefields in the South. Well, that would be a relic as well. I think that my Confederate CS oval belt plate would be considered a relic. I mean, I would fight that that's a relic. It's off another human being. It ended up in New Hampshire. It's significant to the Civil War, and I would argue even to um, an individual who we wouldn't be able to know who that person was now, but we know that they were um, part of that war, and therefore, I would argue that's a relic. Now, again, this is me um, kind of going through these definitions and coming up with items that I think might, um, qualify as one or the other. But those are the types of things. So that, like if you're out in a field in the UK and you find a gold ring from a religious person from history or whatever. Well, that's a relic. There's symbolism there. It might not be an event or a person. Likely you could even figure out the person, but it's symbolic, almost religious, so to speak. So those are a few examples of what I feel like would be relics. I'll put a picture, my thumbnail with a couple of items, and identify whether I think they're relic or artifact. So, I mean, right off the bat, the George Washington inaugural, the oval, the CS oval, the silver, the sterling silver fork that I found adjacent to a farmstead that I can't specifically trace it to the family that lived there, I guess, but it's likely part of the family collection of silver or whatever, and used during a picnic probably. So I could probably argue that would be a relic. Um, so yeah. So on to artifact. Definition of artifact. I'm going to have to move my. Sorry. An artifact is a metal object preserved because it provides evidence of technology, warfare, or daily life. So these are things like, and I'm just going to hold this up. I'll probably put a picture, but this boot buckle that I found out in the field, that is evidence of daily life of a farmer or somebody walking the property, not linked to any person, not linked to any event, no symbolism, just a flat out thing that people can learn from to see the types of products that were made during a specific period of time. So things like musket balls, bayonets, cannon fragments would be artifacts. These types of things, well, maybe in areas where there were actually battles, I think some of those would be relics, but I'm talking more like you're out in your farm field that you detect, and there's never been any any record of any battles for the Revolutionary War, or there certainly weren't any Civil War battles up by me. So you find these random, pieces of just things that people dropped that aren't really symbolic, or I'll go out and I'll find 3 or 4 musket balls, and they weren't used in the Revolutionary War. They were, homesteaders trying to shoot deer. So that's an artifact. And then they'd have it. It would be fixed, and they would be able to forge, whatever, nails, horseshoes. Um, so that's really cool. I looked for a while to try and find if there was an area, if that was an area that they were doing a lot of that, and I just found that it would have been in a stone wall if the stone wall at that spot hadn't been removed by the homeowner. But that was fun. But that would be an artifact, right? That's not a relic. Um, so yeah, so I mean, those are the basic examples that I could come up with. Um, I mean, obviously, it's a lot more. It includes a lot more um, stuff for both of them that I haven't brought up, and there's a lot of nuances. Um, so that and so the overlap um, of the relic and the artifact, which like I said, I think that is very common, and um, the way I feel about the things I found, probably a lot of them would be overlap. But the example that I'd like to give is a Civil War Manet ball. Um, and so, as an artifact, um, when it's recovered from a battlefield, it's studied to understand, um, firing patterns, troop positions, not maybe weapon technology, but I mean, we were pretty sure what the technology was. Um, that'd be an artifact. But as a relic, the same bullet, if it killed or wounded a named soldier, um, and is preserved for that story, it becomes a relic of personal sacrifice. And I think I said that earlier about um, just in general. If you can identify the person um, in the story, the that the relic um, tells, um, then that obviously puts it directly in the relic category. So I hope that wasn't too confusing. Um, Artifacts are generally evidence focused, and relics are memory focused, meaning, like I just said, attached to a person or whatever. Now, I use them interchangeably, honestly, and I don't. Um, I'd have to think about everything I found um, to categorize it properly, and I'm probably wrong in half the cases. I feel like lots of stuff overlaps. Look, I feel like I could find an axe knob out in the middle of a field, but or that buckle that that boot buckle, and so that's a story of someone who was there farming. Is that an event? Probably not, but we could probably get pretty close to name who lost it by dating it and then looking at the records of the farm or the home and finding out who lived there at the time. And then it's from a male boot, and um, it was made in Britain, so in 1690. So we can probably get pretty close to who. Now, we don't revere people who wear boot buckles like we would revere someone who was murdered in a war. Um, so it's a little murky. I think it's a little more clear to me after I looked at it for a while. Um, but either way, um, I don't know as you can go wrong. Um, and I don't know if there's any one particular like part of the country that uses one over the other. Maybe down where the Civil War battles were, I think it would probably be pretty heavy relic, and maybe in some of the um, Northeast Revolutionary War battlefields, um, you could find items that could be tied directly to the war. So, you know, you can make your own decision on what you like to call it, and that's okay with me. Um, but if anybody has any strong opinions or any, if any of you work for museums per se, or um, for an example, or archaeology, or anything like that, I'd love to hear from you in the comments, or send me an email at one more dig. The email is omdstories@gmail.com, and I'd love to have a conversation about this. Obviously, I'm made the podcast because it interests me. Um, so yeah, so that's it. I had a lot of fun. That was a good podcast. I think a lot of cool info. This will be up tomorrow, or well, you're going to hear the podcast tomorrow, so I should say today, um, along with the podcast. On this will be on YouTube. Podcast will be where the podcast always is, wherever you listen to it. Um, but I really appreciate you tuning in, and yeah, this has been one more Dig Metal Detecting Stories, and I'm Dave Spanenberg.